I'm not sure there was ever real casual use. It went from introduction to wake and bake. And then part of that for me was being a part of my family system. The adults, my mom and dad both used alcohol and nicotine. And we grew up as I'm a product of the 60s. And it was a pretty wide open system in our family. My sister, well, let's start with this. My father would make us a highball. That's what they used to call them on New Year's Eve. And I remember getting my first highball at like 6 or 7 years old and not really being able to get it past my nose because it made me nauseous. It made me sick. Alcohol, the smell of it at that age. And it was, I think it was VO, whatever that really is. I don't, American whiskey, I'm not even sure. That's what I remember VO being a very prominent brand in the liquor cabinet. And my sister would drink hers and mine. That's all I remember. So she was already on board and she was 2.5 years older than me with being able to be connected with the adults, being mom and dad. And I was a little runt and kind of left behind and left out. And then I have a little younger sister. She's 6 years younger. So I'm a middle child, only son. And when I got introduced by that same older sister to marijuana at 12 and a half, right around 13, it was just ways and means to get more. That's all I wanted to do was smoke. And because I felt that whatever hold really what I've learned to identify as inadequacy and insecurity and anxiety just went away. It just went away and it was gone. So plus I was able to be like an adult at the family table, at the dinner table, because they're all talking out, they're drinking and smoking. And I got something to be a part of with them. And it wasn't like a secret that I was using because they knew.
Mhm.
And it wasn't like it was like this turn a blind eye, kind of to the thing and then it became really evident that I had a problem at some point when I kept getting arrested because I couldn't leave the house without it. At 16, I was driving and getting caught speeding, and we would often get I don't can't say profiled really, but you have long hair, you wear a purple shirt, you're a hippie. 1971, get out of the car, put your hands on the roof. So I got real accustomed to like getting handcuffed and put in the back of the car. But again, my father, he would just shake his head and say, just, I told you, do that shit at home, do it at home. Don't take it out of the house, do it at home. And I would yes him to death and then, of course, do what I wanted anyway, because I really could not. I really could not do it. Right? That's how it had gotten to that point very, very quickly. And then the career of drug using really exploded 11th, 12th grade, basically anything we could get our hands on. Uh, I still have memories of amphetamines and cocaine was something that, you can't do that. It will kill you. So it was a lot of pot, a lot of amphetamines. Didn't start taking alcohol until I was on LSD one time and just chugged the beer. I'm like, oh boy, this is nice. And took the edge off of that. And then I was introduced to now poly stuff. When I went off to college reluctantly, anything that knocked on my door, I took. Any
Yeah.
substance that they had in 1972, I majored in poly drug abuse and girls. And I excelled. Finally, I excelled at something. That's how that went.
Kinda it kinda interfere with your relationships and career goals and
What
yeah.
what? What are you talking about, relationships and career? That was my relationship, and that was my career goal. Yeah, moved to Colombia and smoked dope and kicked back. I mean, that's what the career goal was in 1974. That was a terrifying what do you mean, what do I wanna be when I grow up? That was the most horrible question you could be asked to a teenager.
I was thinking maybe while you were in college, how did it all affect,
Yeah, if I only
that?
only but the whole deal was I didn't wanna go
Yeah.
at all because my father had a business, and I wanted to follow in his footsteps and be in business and make money and have stuff and, be the hot shit on the block, and, he was like, "Absolutely not," because this is a guy with a ninth grade education, and education was really, really important to him because he didn't have one, so it was important that I get one, and, he continued to push for me to go back when I didn't want to. I found myself in the theater department and I finally came to an answer when they asked me that question, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I told them I wanted to be a teacher or a social worker. And those were the only two things I could identify. If I couldn't be in business, that's what I wanted to do. And I studied to be a teacher. I did high school teaching and teaching kids drama, the actual theater, live theater. And it was really early stages. The technology that we see in the Terminator, all that stuff was somebody's imagination 20 years ahead. The Dick Tracy watch was what I grew up with. And now we have iPhones and holograms. Those were comic books in my day. I
Yeah.
mean, this was somebody on drugs dreaming up shit, and it turned out to be real. That's how it went. And I actually finished college, and I was going to go to grad school, and I was really going to make a career as a starving artist. I got sidetracked because I didn't get admitted right away. I was on a wait list. Wound up going back to work in the family business, and then getting sidetracked with more drug use and more of everything and more cocaine. And I had this careless episode at school where I could show you what I did. Can you see the consequences of drug use? On the bag of cocaine that I was using did not have a caution. Don't operate power equipment under the influence of this. There was no warning sign. I didn't know. Who would have thought, that you mix alcohol and cocaine and operate power equipment, you would have some kind of. So I've actually lost this finger's gone. This one I saved, they put it back on, and this one just got. So it came in threes, and I lived with that as 19 years old. And I talk about immediate acceptance, right? Because it's gone. It's like you can't find it, put it back on. So that was easy, right? But they gave me what they had then for painkillers was called Talwin. I don't even know if they make it anymore, but it was a very, very strong narcotic pain reliever. They gave me morphine every 4 hours. And I said, that's got to stop because I was really digging the morphine, in the hospital. So they let me smoke pot, and I used marijuana for pain relief. And I couldn't, yeah.
At the hospital? Wow.
On the roof. The intern that I was working with, right? He's a resident intern. He's like, I'd rather do this than have you addicted to opiates. If you're telling me, yeah,
Pretty
really
progressive
way ahead
hospital.
of things. So I'm up on the roof, and my parents gave my best friend money to get me a couple of these, and we were smoking, and then that was a license, and there was this whole pity party and all that crap that goes with it. But I was like, fine. I was like, I went back to school and finished with the honor roll stuff and blah 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 in grad school. I mean, I actually had talent for this thing, and again, got sidetracked and got some really great Netflix kind of stories to tell you that it'll take up 5 hours of your night. I'll tell you, they're that entertaining. Like when I tell you, I met my first wife at a roller disco at 2 o'clock in the morning. It's the truth. And it's the truth. And that's my introduction to mental illness because she was in a bipolar episode. Like she was super manic, and I was sent by God. And 5 days later, we're on a plane with her MasterCard to get married in Las Vegas.
Wow.
Not only that, we stayed married for 8 years and brought 3 children into the world that are amazing. They're just amazing. They're older than you guys. I'm pretty sure my oldest is 45 years old, and she's a vice president of a treatment center. My other one, they have MBAs. Education again was pushed toward them, and they all have graduate degrees and blah blah blah. And they called me up and they take me to dinner. My kids don't call me up and I need this, I need that. They said, I need you to spend some time with me. Let's go to dinner. And who's got it better, right? Who's got it better than that? That's really what the reward of all the journey was worth, is to have a conversation and grandchildren and all that stuff. Healthy relationships with the kids who are knowledgeable about my past because they've listened to some of these things, knowledgeable about their mom. I got remarried in recovery, and that was another godsend Netflix story where this is again in recovery, but goes back and forth. I'm in a meeting and I see this hot blonde, and there's anything to get into a meeting, and she was super. I mean, I just couldn't keep. I listened, and I went to see her like a beeline the first time, and she looks at me and she says, "What is your name? What is that?" And I told her my name. She said, "Oh no, I can't believe it. You're the first boy I ever kissed." And we're in Delray Beach, Florida. We're both from Philadelphia, and we went to summer camp together as children. And I was bunkmates with her brother, right? Her older brother, and she was the little runty, ugly sister, but she already had male dependency issues then. And I got picked out of the lot. And sure enough, not only did that happen, right, in real life, but there was intense chemistry and some compatible values that we wound up getting married and working very, very hard to make that functional, and brought another child into the world that made four. And my ex-wife, well, before we got divorced, brought another child into the world with another guy that made five. So like that's a big party. It's a big party, to wake up to every day. For me to feel that pressure of having to be this, not, I mean, they contributed in the way that they did as providers or contributors, but I was pretty much the sole monetary provider for seven people, eight people. I wasn't really good at this. I had no skill sets. I had to learn on the job. And that's a good way to learn. I mean, that's the best way I learn is experientially. And we figured it out, together as a family. And we're still here and healthy. And there's some significant losses as part of the story. But to answer your question, the decline really occurred when my first wife, her name was Pauline, and she had challenges breastfeeding two children at the same time. She read this book and bought into every word of it, where this method of breastfeeding till they're like done with it was going to be in her best interest, and we would have conflict over this. Anyway, it drained her. Whatever was in her battery, it drained her, and she did some self-harm stuff into another episode. It came undone, and we separated. And I just went downhill, because now I was a failed business person now three times, because I was the best way to feed everybody was in business. I couldn't even be a good husband and a terrible dad. I mean, so it's like a triple threat failure. So I just had given up and wound up moving from the casual daily cocaine use to opiates. And then when we couldn't get the opiates of choice being dilaudid, because that was pure and clean, and there was no such thing as fentanyl. Now we're talking the 80s. There was bad dope on the street on occasion. So I was doing that. And then that just eroded all of my interest in living and caring. I gave up everything for drugs. I literally, everything got sacrificed to the drug gods, all the equipment, everything, credit, your credit, my credit, money, whatever, we just went, including a place to live. And so that box looked pretty good, and I was out there, Camden, New Jersey, which is a small slice of any urban slum area.
13.
Where'd you meet mommy? I met her in the Medline. I mean, this is a daily stuff. Where'd you meet mommy? In the Medline. We were in detox together. I mean, this is what kids are learning today from their parents' story. I mean, this is true, and because when they stay clean, that's a great story. When they don't, it's not so pretty. So yeah, that's where it took me, or that's where I allowed it to go. However you want to frame that, but I was in a lot of pain. Jail was looking like a pretty good intervention, because I had accumulated a lot of charges, being stupid and being a shitty crook. And they kept putting me back on the street, and I wouldn't show up for court. So there was all these contempt charges and all this stuff. And I didn't care. I really didn't care, because people can get clean in jail, and you can actually get better from that. That looks like a pretty good move. And so anyway, that's
One of the things you
yeah.
mentioned early or in your writing was that you were a good starter and a poor finisher. Did
Mhm.
that have to do with your attempts at recovery or more business?
Business and basically anything. The interesting thing about recovery, my best friend, who unfortunately he's deceased, he became a physician. So he was rewriting scripts for us, right? And he kept getting intervened upon at the hospital, because he was going to be an anesthesiologist for the drugs. He said, "This is the best drugs ever," right? So, and they kept nodding out in the elevator, and they would send him the treatment and bring him back. So he shows up with me one day, because he showed me how to inject drugs and do it right and all this stuff. Good friend of mine, right? So we're writing Percocets and shooting cocaine and getting by. And so he shows up. He says, "You got to meet me at this place. I went to this thing called NA, and it's the best ever, and blah blah blah. And meet me at this church." And so I went. And that day, ironically, I had gotten on methadone, right, for the very first time. So I didn't shoot any dope that day. This was amazing. This was like a godsend. Oh, this is 1985. Of course, he doesn't show up because he started relapsing again. And I sat through the meeting without him. I said, maybe he'll come. I sat through the meeting. And then they said at the end, "Does anybody have anything they want to share?" Whatever they called. And I didn't know. So I raised my hand and I said, "Oh, yeah, I'm really happy I'm here. I got on methadone. I got on a clinic today, and I didn't shoot any dope. And I feel really good." And somebody basically right then said, "Come back when you're clean." Right then. and come back. You're not, you're not welcome, basically. You know what I mean? Without saying that. And I never went back. I didn't go back. And it stuck with me forever. It stuck with me forever. And then I got a chance to go to treatment again in '87, in October of '87. And I got on a plane, came to Florida, and my father was here. And he gave me an opportunity to go. And I listened to everything they said, everything they told me. I
Is
just
that is that when he said, "Just try it and give it your best shot"?
just do your best. Do your best. That was the biggest supportive thing. And he peeled off a bunch of money and paid them. And they kept shipping me facility to facility because I wasn't, I guess, the best patient. I don't know. They kept trying, and I kept going. I kept going and listening. I went to 4 different places and stayed drug free, and tried to sabotage it a number of times, but didn't didn't use. And that was the bottom line. I just didn't use. I stayed drug free from the day I walked in that place. And that's a while ago. It the most important thing is that, whatever I did then, I woke up and do the same thing today, which is no matter what, I'm not going to use. I mean, it's the same decision they taught me then, that stick around, the doors are locked. If you want to go, you got to sign this paper. It's going to take 72 hours. And by the time you get there, you're not, we'll open the door for you, because it's in Florida. It's like, you can't lock you up for drugs. For being mentally, they can, but otherwise not. And they said, by the time you get around to going out that door, you'll have changed your mind 1,000 times. So here's the
And
paper. Yeah, go ahead and sign it. Go ahead and sign it. And I never did.
I want to back up because you make a very valid point of you might change your mind 1,000 times. What was it that helped you make up your mind? When did you realize that your life had become unmanageable? What was that turning point for you?
It's about going was when they showed up. My father and the girlfriend he had showed up looking for me, and then wrote a letter 2 or 3 weeks later. And I had this letter that they wrote me that they would put me on a plane. And it wasn't like there was any doubt that I was an addict. There was never really any denial. It was like I didn't know a way out. I never knew that there was a way out, other than, I'd gone to detox twice in 1985, and by the time they said, I was ready to listen to go to treatment, the opportunity to go had evaporated. So went to a state treatment center. I knocked on the door. I called them up on a Sunday, and they said, "Well, we're closed." I said, "I don't give a fuck. I'm a taxpayer." And they're like, "What do you mean?" Let me tell you something. I am so desperate that I'm going to get on a bus, and I'm going to get there. I'm going to sit on the front step until you open the door. I mean, I got to be there. I can't not be there because things are that bad in my world. And they were like, "You got to be crazy." I said, "Not crazy. I'm desperate." And so they said, "Well, okay, then come on down." And they let me in, and it turned out to be a therapeutic community with
Yes.
nobody in there but people doing jail time. They were
Yep.
all there, court ordered. And they would look at me and they said, "What are you doing here?" I said, "What do you mean? I'm trying to get better." And they said, "You're crazy, man. You don't get better here. They just beat your ass up." And they gave me a razor, and they said, "You want that? You like that mustache?" I said, "Well, yeah, I've had it for 10 years. You got to shave it off. If you want to stay here, you got to shave it off. You got to show us that willingness." And like took me 4 hours to come to that. And then I did it. I did it. I shaved it off. Whole new identity. And that's when I met that other girl who turned out to be a great running buddy. She was already 10 years into her addiction. She had a lot more experience at it than I did. She knew how to do things that I was still learning. So we ran hard for 2 years. We ran hard for 2 years, and neither of us really died or overdosed because we were doing
Mhm.
the audits. You can't overdose on them. You take 1,000 of them, and you just don't die. And we would go, whatever. Not good stories there, but we managed to not kill each other. And we both had hepatitis and severe consequences of using. And they sent me this letter, and it was already a decline for both of us. And I went on the plane, and she got on a methadone program and stayed on it. I talked to her every once in a while. 35 years later, 36 years later, she got to Georgia. She made it to Georgia to try to catch me.
Regarding the methadone, because I myself, I was on Suboxone for 2 years. Did you feel like it helped you?
Methadone saved my life. I mean, at that time in 1985, I would go on the program up to a certain dose,
Mhm.
and then I would get off because it was eating me up. It's bad. It's bad. The stuff is
Yeah.
bad.
Half-life is really long.
Yeah. And my cousin, who was the family drug addict that educated all of us, in the '60s, he would say, "Get on the program, but don't go any higher than 30 or 35. Don't let them give you more because you'll never get off." And so I listened to him. But he's the same one that would get me Dilaudid, because I served a purpose for him because I had a car and he looked like Drek, he was 10 years older than me, but looked 100 years older because of the drugs. No teeth, like no teeth, like not a one. And from meth. In any event, I would get to 30, 35 milligrams, and then I would sabotage it with cocaine or whatever, and I'd say, get out of here. You know, that's how that went. So it was a cycle. Then there was a number of clinics in the urban area, and they all talked to each other, but they didn't talk to each other to the point because they need customers, right? They needed customers. So they let you back on the program and you get on the program and that would be okay. Because I wasn't a Xanax guy. I couldn't take Xanax and sedatives that made me sick and off. So I would just really behave myself with the methadone. I would always have a job, always had a place to eat, always had a place to, get extra money from my boss, because that was part of the deal, was to work.
When you said methadone saved your life, did it kind of bring you to a point where you could function and have a baseline?
Right. I could work. Right.
Yeah.
I could work.
It
And,
did
and
the same.
I wasn't sticking dirty needles in my arm, other parts of my body. It let me function like a semi-normal human being, where I would take care of my ADLs, my activities of daily living. I get washed and clean clothes, and I had some measure of self-respect, even though I was on the program. That's what methadone did as a channel or a pathway to normalcy. It wasn't going to be a forever thing for me because I watched these people at 100. I could never qualify for a take-home dose. That was a big thing. You got a take-home dose or a spit back or whatever. There's all this crap that if you ever want to get high, you just go to methadone clinics. I mean, people don't know where drugs are anywhere. They just go to a clinic and they're everywhere.
Mhm.
So you learn, it's like jail. You learn the things you don't need. Nobody needs to learn this stuff, but that's how that goes. But methadone that's what I say when it saved my life, because it gave me that pathway that, there was hope left. There was still some hope in me to be able to function and move forward and get out of my own goddamn way. Because I was my own worst enemy, right? I always blamed other people because I was good at that, right? I was always the victim. I mean, that's just the general theme of addicts. There's always, if you're misunderstood and all that crap. But the Suboxone, ironically, they came and recruited me to recruit other doctors to prescribe when they first brought it in. Reckitt Benckiser, that owned the patent, they would recruit people like me. I would go to lunch. I would take doctors out to lunch with the rep and train them on how to prescribe and try to get people don't give them more than 8. They don't ever need more than 8. They don't need, and 32 milligram dose, that's the maximum. Don't give them more than 8. They can't get off of it at 2. It covers their receptors. They don't need more than 2, but
They put me on 16. It was too much, and
and
I had to go to rehab to get off of it.
to get off of
Yeah.
it. And that's the MAT edition of my app was that award-winning app with medication-assisted treatment. That was the beginning of a medication, the adoption of that medication-assisted treatment where we needed to monitor people. And again, it's a great, like everything, it's a great medication when it's not abused and they don't prescribe. And so it goes hand in hand because addicts, if they have the worst story I got, I swear to God, this is one of those terrible stories, and it's not. It's addicts. If they have a headache, they have a brain tumor. That's how they think.
Yeah.
I had a girl that worked for me. It really happened. She had a headache, had a brain tumor, and died. I mean, because she never went and got it diagnosed because she was too busy taking drugs to get away from the pain that the tumor created. So she always thought she had a headache. She never really got the MRI for her brain scan until it was too late, and then it was too late. And 42. 43 years old. I mean, just heartbreaking. Heartbreaking. Go ahead, no, go ahead.
What all does your app do? You mentioned your app, is it FlexDek?
I moved away from that because what I thought was going to be so here's the challenge I experienced with the app, and there's some really good ones that are in the marketplace that are as good, if not better. It was all about accountability and being able to do this. And Sam showed we entered a contest and we won and all this stuff. It never took off. It was too far ahead of the curve. People would buy it, or we would white label it and lease it to them, right? Lease the software service, and they couldn't implement. Agencies couldn't implement the app because the patients would resist it. They didn't want GPS. They didn't want to be known. They didn't want that accountability. I tell them I'm not using this thing. It's great for somebody else, And so I kind of got caught up with the native app of Apple and the native app of the Play Store. They kept increasing the coding, and I couldn't stay abreast to it, and it got too expensive. So I pulled it out of the market and put it on this site. It's on this site here, Sober Life. And so it's still there, the questionnaire to get rewards, because contingency management is going to take a run at the intervention now. Contingency management is going to sweep the country in the next 5 years, maybe. It's taken a while to get out of California, where they passed a law. I'll talk to you as if you have never heard of it, if that's without any disrespect.
Please.
Please. So contingency management is like, if you do this, then you get that. It's a rewards model. And they did a lot of research with getting people to quit smoking. They would pay them money if you quit smoking, we'll give you money, right? And as long as they paid them, they would quit. So as soon as they stopped paying them, they started smoking again. So they learned a lot during these trials, of clinical trials and stuff, when they do research like this. So they know from the AIDS program in San Francisco, they implemented a trial for contingency management with the population there for med compliance and treatment compliance. And they got great results, that people would respond if they got food cards or bus passes or stuff that was beneficial for them. And so then they passed the law in California 2022 now, that this would be a way to address the methamphetamine issue, because they had already come up with Suboxone. Well, that's opiates are taken off the board. We got that covered. And marijuana, we just legalized the shit, so we got that covered. And in fact, this meth problem, what are we going to do about that? So they put this contingency management thing. So any health department in any county in California can apply to implement this model and go through the state and get funding, right, for at least a year or two. And they give people up to, I think the maximum is $300 or $600 in food cards or gift cards to show them clean urines.
Wow.
And yeah, right. Wow. So I was doing this in 2018 with cryptocurrency, because there's not enough money in the world for addicts. So I wanted to teach people problem solving skills. Like, crypto's going to be here forever. They just don't know it yet. And they being the institutions, but it's here and it's making another crypto run, blah, blah, blah. So I created a sober coin, and that's the reward. So we couldn't get it. I tried to get funding. So I'm talking about drug treatment with the horrible history of corruption and sexual abuse that goes on in treatment centers, and all the insurance fraud, right? To investors are like, get out of here. And then I said, oh yeah, but I got this cryptocurrency and we're going to get people better. They're like, get the fuck out of here with this shit. This is just a Ponzi thing. And then I'm like, no, people are going to really do it, because you have no idea what people will do for $20. They've hurt people. They've hurt people for $20 just to get crack. That's what they used to do. So they will do this. And it was a hard sell, because it was the same year I lost my son, and I kind of like took a nosedive with the whole thing, because he was stuck on stupid and stuck on fentanyl, and just the way it went. So I didn't have the that magic that people need to make that happen, and persuasion. It kind of got ripped out of my soul.
What?
And it's back. I'm doing it again. Because I really believe in the project. So we're doing it again.
So you're bringing back the sober coin.
Sober coin is going to be in the market before the end of the year. We're going to base it on Solana, and that's the meme coin where Trump and Melania created their bullshit, right? So Solana is like a really known meme coin. So we're going to have a meme coin, and we'll have a rewards coin for treatment centers to give to their patients if they meet their clinical goals, whatever they set up individualized, and then they'll be able to take their coin that they earned at the treatment center, which is really their own goddamn money anyway, because they've given them $50,000. So give the patient back some money so they can get into a halfway house, so they can get into the pharmacy and get the meds they need that you're prescribing, and all they give them is a piece of paper with the med on it. They don't give them the meds, because they're not allowed to, but they can give them a prescription, but they don't have any money to buy it. So let's give them a chance. They're setting them up to fail, which is what really goes on. And so I'm really invested in this. It's a late push in life, because why not? It'll keep me off the beach.
Yeah, I think it's great.
It'll keep me off the beach. That's all. Look at that tan, right? I was on the beach. So yeah, I really believe in this. This is a 10-year run that we can make this happen, especially since they validated it and are getting data out of California that it works. People stay clean when you give them money, because they're not staying clean to stay alive. We got that, right? That's not enough of an incentive to not use. But money is. I mean, that's addicts. That's the way addicts think. Everyone goes, oh, you give them money, they're going to get high. They're going to get high anyway. They don't need money to get high. I mean, they're addicts. They find ways and means. So people who aren't addicts, they don't get it. But people that do say, that's a damn good idea. I like that idea. That's a good idea. And then I ever hear,
approach. Yeah.
well, we got to do something different, because what we're doing for 40 years is the same pile of shit. It's the same pile of shit that don't work. There's multiple pathways. You know how long it took them to really say that out loud? It was always 12-step recovery or nothing.
Yeah.
But there's multiple pathways to change, and multiple pathways to improve the quality of your life. And the measures are in productivity. The measures are not going to jail, not going to beat your wife. Those are your measures of well-being. And they're not giving up marijuana. I mean, that's the population. They're growing up with tablets and pot, and they're not going to give it up so readily.
When you're speaking about multiple pathways, how do you feel about obviously ketamine and psilocybin and psychedelics?
Ayahuasca, all the psychedelics. In 5 years, we're going to be having a conversation of why it took so long for these people get better. I've been an ibogaine fan since 1991. I wanted to bring, and the FDA said, absolutely, you can't do ibogaine. It's because it works. So you have to go to Mexico. You have to go to Mexico, get ibogaine, get better, come back.
Tried it, but I've heard it. I've heard positive things.
When it's done appropriately in the clinical setting, and I've had people that I've referred down there, and they come back for outpatient care, and they're better. They don't use. It's
Pathways are rewired.
Yeah, it's like in hypnosis, they talk about there's a break in your wiring, and the hypnosis, it connects it. So this is what happens on the ibogaine journey when it's done correctly, right? When it's done, not this crazy shit in the jungle and the ceremonies that people are paying $6, $8, $10,000 fly to Peru for. That's just recreational. They're not, I've got some serious opinions about what's going on and the vulnerability that people are getting taken advantage of. But I think I supervise and do ketamine in my office with people, and I've watched people do a 180, just a 180, and they're not necessarily drug addicts. These are trauma.
I don't know anything about. I've done some reading, but as far as how that's carried out, like again, talk to me like I've never heard of it, because I barely know much. If somebody was considering doing something like, what are the pros? What are the cons? What are the things? What are the questions you should be asking?
Well, there's a lot of data, so I'll just give you a quick synopsis. Ketamine is a dissociative chemical that they use often in vet clinics, because that's where it's been most effective. People robbing vet clinics to get the ketamine because they're doing, surgery on animals that need to be kind of like out because they're dangerous, the dogs and stuff. They also use it on the battlefield for soldiers who are wounded, and it gets them into a place that it doesn't hurt, because they're disconnected. It's like a dissociative, if you understand what that means. So the reality we're experiencing, they're disconnected from for a 55-minute period of time. It's not like hours and hours and hours. So it's a short-acting dissociative. And it also will give you a person the opportunity to see information from multiple perspectives. Because the information, well, let me see. Where'd it go? The center of this dot stays. It doesn't change, but when you start to look at it from 365 degrees or 360, right? The circle's 360, right? With my geometry, you get different perspectives. You get different perspectives, and you get to get the freedom to choose which one is your best fit. Because people have often been like tunnel vision on one perspective only, and if it didn't fit, then they would negate it. So that's what the chemical allows. And some of these other psychedelics that are being introduced, like in my office, people have to come and bring their own medicine and self-administer. I'm not a doctor to be able to prescribe or to administer, or a nurse, so they self-administer, and I'm just there basically holding space is what we call it. So when they're dissociative, I could feed them all kinds of crap, right? I could be really rude and feed information into their brain, and that's not our job. Our job is to make sure they're safe physically and emotionally and psychologically, so they have the most maximum experience of that chemical for that period of time. Done that way, people have much better outcomes than if we go under hypnosis and feed people, you've heard about those false memories that have been implanted in people. You've heard, right, on 60 Minutes. And I was sexually abused by, and some of that may or may not, we don't know. We don't know, but they're talking about false memories. And that's how they got stuck with them, is that people would do hypnotherapy and they're accessing the subconscious. So this is that way, gateway in there. And it's an accelerated gateway, and it's incredibly effective and cost effective in so many ways and beneficial in so many ways. The danger is that somebody has history of mental illness they don't disclose. Like my wife, for instance, who's bipolar, and that could put her in a psychotic episode. Somebody that may be schizophrenic or have, history of that in their system. And sometimes they don't even know, right? They don't know. So those are the risks that are involved, that somebody could go on one of these trips and not come home. So, the old saying, desperate people do desperate things. And when they're really, really hopeless and near suicidal because they're reliving trauma, or they so depressed they can't, they're so bipolar too, they're so depressed, they're hopeless, then we start to look at different choices of intervention, because medication flattens the mood so much they don't even really experience life.
There's that.
Yeah, you've heard people, there's no mood swing anymore, there's no window, it closes it so much that it's flat and they're miserable. I mean, they're functioning, they're going to work, but they don't get any joy out of anything. So these are some of the pathways that are going to come online more readily and more available as the research gets more released. And of course, politics and pharmaceuticals are playing a part in it, and all the geopolitical stuff. Ibogaines from Africa, ayahuasca's in Peru. They can remanufacture these natural plants, but it won't be the same because there's rituals connected with all of them that connect people to the experience. So it's all part of it. You go into a hospital and do it, it's different. The places in Mexico, there's one called, I don't want to drop names because I don't want to sound like I'm pitching anybody. So it's kind of one of those gray areas on a podcast, but there's a couple places you can find easy enough with ibogaine treatment, and you'll see them. And you can read about it there because they're really explanatory. They have videos on the websites because people don't know. And it's not always a hard sell, to come here. I think there's 2 or 3 places down there in Cancun, in south of San Diego. What's that called? Tijuana, down in that area. And that's where they go. And I sent somebody down there. He called himself a chronic relapser, 38 years old, and he hasn't used since he came back. And that's, the last job he had, they flew him to Italy. He's a boat captain. He knows how to drive yachts and stuff. How fucking crazy and drug use and heroin. But they say they flew him over, and the guy that owned this, however millions of dollars this yacht cost, they took one look at him, fired him, sent him back, and that's when he was ready to go. He says, "I got to do something. I just lost this $80,000 gig." I'm like, "Yeah, I guess you did." And he's now a brand new guy. He's his best self. So that's my best story, aside from some others, but that's a real good one.
Is that something that you ever experienced yourself going through?
Okay. No. Or ketamine. Or when I was a kid, I took a lot of hallucinogens. We'd go out and pick mushrooms, and pick organic mushrooms out of the cow shit. We did that, and that was amazing. We did what they called LSD, but it's hard to tell because they used to have strychnine in it and speed in it. They called it acid, but it wasn't really what came out of the labs that Ken Kesey wrote about. I don't know if you remember that book, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And yeah, I mean, that was where that generation came from. Allen Ginsberg, it all came out of that whole thing. And William Burroughs, I mean, those are the people that were fascinating to me, and what was going on. James Baldwin, and I grew up in the race wars and integration. I mean, that's where I come from. That place of Rodney King was like a cherry on the top. I mean, why can't we all get along? I mean, I lived through that when Martin Luther King was assassinated. And talk about conspiracy theories. Whoa, that was the beginning of that stuff. Who killed Martin? Right after that.
When you mentioned earlier holding space for others, what did holding space look like with you and working with clients and their grief and their loss when you've also experienced loss?
We have a line, and each of us professionally have to find it for ourselves, where professional self-disclosure can be therapeutic and where it's going to be more harmful. And it really is a dependent variable with the client. So when I lost Jay, I took a break. I'm my born Jewish. I practice Judaism. Sit what we call it sitting shiva, which is a period of mourning, and then we go back to work. So that's what I did. I slowly took cases or clients again, and ease myself back into being of service. Sometimes the waves of grief would be so strong, and they still are, because it's always yesterday. When you're a grieving parent, and I think my camera's frozen, but when you're a grieving parent, you're always like yesterday. It's like Groundhog's Day. That's what it is like for me. That's my best way to explain it. The pain comes and it's like a 10, and then 10 minutes later it's like a 3. But there's always that loss. There's a hole. And then I lost his mom 4 years later, because her depression from that loss was so significant that she would be actively suicidal like every day. And she had stuff about that I wasn't privy to, and I didn't want to be privy to it because I wanted to be her husband and not her therapist. Right. That was always a challenge in the house, because you don't diagnose your friends, you don't treat your friends. There's rules. So I would send her and refer her and so forth. But yeah, she was really, it was devastating loss for her. It was her only child that she had in her life. I had four other ones. Right. I had already experienced birth and raising children, and she was an amazing stepmom. She was active in recovery. She passed with 35 years in recovery. I mean, she was in it, but this was really just suffocating for her spirit. She deserved a better way to go than she did, but I'm glad she didn't do it to herself. As far as it was a wild, like you saw Lethal Weapon. You ever see a Lethal Weapon moving? And they blow that freaking trailer up on the beach. He's in a out. Well, that's what it was like when I saw the picture of the smoke on the side of the highway. She was in a Winnebago, and we still don't know how or what happened, but it caught on fire and she pulled over, and she didn't exit it and get an exit the vehicle fast enough before it blew up between the gas and the propane. And it was just like, what the fuck? Who gets a call like that? This is like TV. I'm making spaghetti dinner on a Monday night, and I get a call from the officer. I get a call. We need you to help identify a body. I'm like, what? I thought it was a prank call. I couldn't believe it. And they sent me a picture. That's how I could, because everything else, from the fire, there's not anything to look at. It's just horrible. Your imagination could be spinning now and understand that situation. Whereas with Jay got hit on a scooter, one of those freaking mopeds going 40 miles an hour with no helmet, no goggles, no light. And he just got hit and got catapulted, across an intersection. And the rule in Florida is, if there's a heartbeat for a victim, you have to take him to the hospital. Now, he got struck by a vehicle, 2,500, 3,000 pound vehicle. There's not a whole lot of quality of life coming out of that. Together, we made our decisions as a parents. And that moment in time is frozen when we looked at each other and made that decision, to let them go. And we're all faced with that because we're all mortal. We're all going to die. Some of us don't get to stay as long as others.
Did that, or how did it, or did it challenge your recovery in any way?
No, when you make a decision in the morning that you're not going to use no matter what, and that's your discipline and habit, or for me, that's what it is. That's what it is. And I got the call at 9 o'clock that night, and we stayed up all night and all day, and until he's got tubes in every part of his body and seizures, and it's just an ugly scene to describe in intensive care. Thought of using, it didn't know. I would not rob myself and anesthetize that pain or try to escape that pain. We did go together and get hot fudge sundaes 11 o'clock in the morning, or whatever. That's what she wanted. Or whenever. That's all she wanted was a hot fudge sundae. No whipped cream. Right. Because again, the sun's coming up. The sun's going to come up. And there's nothing we can do to stop that. The sun's coming up and life's going to go on. And that's the hard reality of waking up every day, that no matter what, we got to live life on life's terms. That's what we were all taught. That's what we were taught in recovery. And sometimes it just ain't fucking pretty. And this is not a pretty memory. It's not a pretty story. There's no dressing to put on it to make it better. He touched tons of people. This kid, man, I could go on and on and on about him. He made it to 27, but he struggled for half of that, at least, with drugs, one or another. I still can't figure out why, because he was basically conceived in an NA meeting. We would, he was at the meetings with us. He grew up in the halfway houses when we were running them. That's what we did. And he was a part of our lives, and don't know how he got connected to chemicals his siblings used, that he had a relationship with chemicals that was different from theirs because they grew out of theirs. All the other four grew out of their drug use and didn't turn that corner like he did. So it's one of those mysteries.
What do you wish more people knew about early recovery? What do you wish more people in early recovery knew about what's really on the other side?
Well, they all know where they came from, right? We all have our stories of our horror stories. People in early recovery, for me, early recovery is no time is not recovery, right? So the new catchphrase is long-term recovery. It's still not long-term abstinence because abstinence and recovery are different. So for me, it's always about really living our best life every day, not unlike we did when we were using. I mean, we have to get the most out of that day as we can, because nowadays, I don't know if it's really different for you guys, but for me, I do a lot of walking around town where I live, and I see a lot of distracted drivers driving with one part of their face in their phone and the other part of their face in the mirror or whatever they're looking at, but it ain't the road. Just driving up on the sidewalk and running over people and just hitting poles and not going slow enough. And that's what I see. So for me, every minute, every day is very precious. There's this joke when you get to be a certain age, it's like above ground. Well, that's the joke that's we all can embrace, because these days, you guys are in Texas, you got a lot of space down there, except on the highways, and where it's congested. I know I've been down there. I know what it's like. I've been to Texas a number of times, got arrested, Texarkana. You know, that was not a fun story. They took my motorcycle away, fuckers. But they gave it back. They gave it back as long as I got out of town. They said, as long as you get out of town, you're gonna have it back. I sold drugs to an undercover cop at the fair. Really? You know how big that Texarkana fair is? It's like 2 states. That's how many people are there. And out of all those people, I wound up doing the stupidest thing ever, right? So anyway, yeah. So that's how I see life. It's a very precious gift to not take advantage or take for granted anymore. More so every day I wake up. Like I said, this year I'll be 71. Again, when I was in my 20s, 30 looked to be old. If I make it to 30, I'm doing good. If I make it to 30, I'm doing good. Because that was the way it went. And then I was like 40, then turned 50, and it's like, oh, what the hell's going on here? Yeah, you got the colonoscopies, you got the changes in your body. This is what you have to look forward to, guys. The realities of aging, less hair, less black hair, more gray hair, all of those things that happen naturally. There's not, you could go covering it up, you could get liposuction, you could get like Botox and all that stuff, but it's still what it is. You still are who you are. So people early in recovery, enjoy the ride, buckle up, because it gets better. It's just the best ride of your life. The ups and downs of it, it's not a merry-go-round. It is definitely a roller coaster, and a real exciting one. And then you get off and get on the line again. That's the way it's got to go.
What is with everything in modern life, with the tech you've built, with the different forms of treatment, how do you see recovery and how do you view recovery now?
With a bigger open mind. Look, I had this, in where we live, we had an abundance of housing, right? We had a lot of destination recovery treatment centers in Delray. We had a lot of extra housing, a lot of abuses and blah, blah. Anyway, we decided as a group, we would, this is before NAR and FAR and all the other subchapters. We would put people in a motel for 2 or 3 days and let them figure out what they wanted to do if they couldn't comply. And so I bought a motel, and I wound up having a bunch of people from all the halfway houses there. There was a great article in the New York Times about what we were doing way back in when was that? 2007, I think, or 2009. I had a coffee house, had all these things going on as a community. We had a community, and those periods of time when people are not compliant in the halfway house that they have, and they're gifted and are get an opportunity to learn and get a start over. If they use, which is normal, right? That's what addicts do. Take advantage of those couple 3 days and come back and try again, and don't quit. And don't quit, and don't quit on yourself, because you're worth it. We're all worth that. And recovery became, I was doing Suboxone and fentanyl, because fentanyl, Jay came to the motel after a treatment episode in jail and overdosed within 24 hours in a motel, right? Because fentanyl just hit the street, and I'm doing CPR on him and mouth to mouth, and screaming at this little fucker to not die on me. And they hit him with the Narcan. That was just brand new. They had to puncture his jeans and give him a shot. They didn't have the nasal. This is how early it was. That's when I knew that he was going to be a short life. Because he was that disrespectful to himself and to everybody around him. I was open-minded to let that happen. I had couples living together. I had same-sex couples living together in the same community, because that's what real life is. And that's what recovery is. It's real life. You don't get to pick who you sit next to at the meeting, right? That's the way it's supposed to be. We're an anonymous group, and I believe in that wholeheartedly and without reservations. So I would create my recovery philosophy was like, here's plenty of room. Do what you can do for yourself. And if you need help, we're here to help you. But I'm not going to control you, because that's not possible. First of all, it's not my job to control you. And you're not going to listen anyway, because whenever there's controls put on, people rebel. So here's the guidance and there's the support, and we're here. And your best decision is to accept the help. I mean, that's the hardest thing for addicts to do, is to accept help with humility and grace. Those are challenges for people, because we believe we should be able to do stuff, and we're not equipped. We're not taught these things. We're not taught vocabulary for feelings. We're not taught stuff in schools. So we're coming into this a lot of times blind and without knowledge and skills. So expectations are unrealistic, but open-mindedness, the different methodologies, different pathways. As long as you show up, there's a chance. If you're not dead, there's hope. That's my bottom line. If you're not freaking dead, because that's what I experienced, there's hope for you to get better and change and live your best life. That's really the best message I could share with anybody.
Dr. J, thank you so much, man, for being willing to jump on with us. Thank you for your service, your vision, your voice, your story. I find you highly creative. What you're doing in all different areas with the sober coin, with the network, with the apps, your philosophy is refreshing. And then also being a therapist, that have the kind of mindset and approach that you're taking. That I'm sure a lot of it comes from your lived experience. I just want to say thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate the time. I'll leave you with one last thing, if I may. The approach is strength-based as opposed to deficit, right? It's always a strength-based. What's right? What's going good? What can we build on to improve? Because there's always areas that would benefit from improvement. We all have those, right? That's what being human is. But if we look at the strengths and focus on the strengths and the things you're doing right, and the things that you can do in your areas of expertise and competence, it just it shifts the whole view of everything. And they go from a 2 to a 5 in hope immediately. It's like that quick, because then they go to a 10, because they're now employed and they're housed and they're eating and they're brushing their teeth and doing things that make them feel good, right? And then, of course, the sex. Let's not forget that. That's the first thing that wakes up. It's like, oh, yeah, the laundry room's looking good, right? So back to rehabromance.com, right? That's it. All right, guys.
How can people connect with your work and plug into what you're doing?
My best email is jonas@sobernetwork.com. And I have this new brand, this new lifestyle thing I'm starting.
Water.
We got the sober life water, and this sober life. I don't even think you can see it on my shirt there, but I just rebranded the model. It's a lifestyle brand for health and wellness that includes the whole yoga community and everybody, because it's not about not drinking. It's about being attentive and aware, and which is better when you're not drunk or under the influence of anything. So it's a lifestyle brand with a lot of merchandise. We have soberlife.com. The sober systems are still live. You can sign up and log in and start earning rewards now on Sober Life. There's a sober rewards model up there. So we're really trying to make a dent and leave a legacy of change. That's the whole goal, is that one person can really, if you believe, can make a change. And I don't need to be that person. I just need to push the issue. That's what I think, right? Because we're all together.